During the autumn of 1930, the legendary British explorer Bertrand Thomas embarked on his most historic journey. He attempted to become the first European to cross the daunting Rub al-Khali, the inhospitable Arabian desert known intimidatingly to English speakers as the Empty Quarter, covering an area of approximately 647,500 square kilometers. However, spanning across Saudi Arabia, Oman, the United Arab Emirates, and Yemen in the southern Arabian Peninsula, the Empty Quarter is larger than France, making it the world's largest sand desert in terms of volume, with towering 250-meter-high dunes blocking the path of potential travelers. But if any European could conquer it, it was likely Bertrand Thomas. Born on summer 7, 1892, in England, Thomas had been sent to Mesopotamia during World War I, where he quickly familiarized himself with the region and its inhabitants. He joined local forces and even became a political advisor to the Sultan of Oman. He knew the region and knew how to survive. Thus, on October 6, 1930, he set out from Salalah on the coast of Oman, accompanied by 25 Bedouin guides, to embark on his historic attempt. As he later described, they headed north over the approximately 900-meter-high Kara Mountains, through dancing groves, and from there into the vast unknown steppe. For the next 59 days, Thomas was neither seen nor heard from. In fact, his own government didn't know where he was or what he was doing, and they would have likely expressly forbidden him from making this attempt if they had known. Thomas led the mission in secret, and if there had been a problem, there would have been no rescue team. Finally, on February 5, 1931, Thomas appeared in Doha, Qatar, in good health and unharmed, with an incredible collection gathered from the desert. During his crossing, he had collected over 400 specimens of natural history, including 21 new species for Western science. Yet, the specimens of natural history were not the only objects Thomas brought back from the desert. His journey had allowed him to obtain something even more incredible, a story. The one told to him by his Bedouin guides, passed down from generation to generation. The story of an ancient city lost in the desert, hidden beneath the sand. As one of the guides said, "It was a great city, our fathers told us, that once existed. A city rich in treasures, with gardens, date palms, and a fort of red silver. It is now buried under the sands, a few days to the north." With no time to spare in his arduous attempt to cross the desert, Thomas could not continue the quest for the lost city. And although he intended to return to resume the search, he never had the opportunity. However, he recorded the story as it was presented to him in his landmark book, Arabia Felix, which quickly caused a sensation among the European public. One man who became particularly enamored with the lost life of the desert was none other than Lawrence, better known as Lawrence of Arabia. To his friends, Lawrence wrote, "I am convinced that the remains of an ancient Arab civilization are to be found in this desert. The Arabs have told me that the ruined castles of the great king Had, son of Kinad, have been seen by wandering tribes in the region. There is still substance in these Arab accounts." Lawrence himself had planned to venture into the desert and search for the lost city, but he never had the chance. He tragically died in a motorcycle accident in 1935. However, before his death, Lawrence gave the mysterious city a nickname that stuck. He called it the Atlantis of the Sands. Could this lost city truly exist, an Atlantis of the Sands waiting to be discovered? In the Quran, there is an account of an ancient tribe that has long puzzled historians and scholars, known as the Ad. This tribe originated from a region called Aram. Interestingly, it does not appear in the texts of Judaism and Christianity, even though these three Abrahamic religions are built upon the same history and thus contain mentions of the same ancient tribes and events. Think of King Solomon, Moses, and the Egyptian pharaoh, Noah and the flood, and so on. They are all present in the holy books of the three traditions, but not Had, the most famous tribe. The tribe appears in the Quran when Muhammad warns the disbelievers, "Have you not considered how your Lord dealt with Ad, with Iram, who had lofty pillars, the likes of whom had never been created in the land?" Many scholars have wondered why Ad would not have been mentioned elsewhere if they had truly built these unique structures that had never been created in the land. Did they really exist, and if so, what happened to them? The Quran provides an extraordinary answer to this second question. According to the Quran, Ad was a tribe that existed in the Arabian Peninsula after Noah's flood. There, they built a mighty kingdom, utilizing their immense wealth and expertise to erect monuments on elevated grounds and construct palaces, as if they were living eternally. They did not hesitate to assert their power over their neighbors, viciously conquering many inhabitants of the peninsula, as the Quran states about Ad, "And when you seize as tyrants." However, this immense power led to arrogance. The people of Ad became idolatrous and wicked. They denied the signs of their Lord, disobeyed his messengers, and followed the orders of Iram stubbornly. As a consequence, God sent the prophet Hud to warn the people of Ad to abandon their evil ways. Yet, the people of Ad responded, "But this is the same as what you were sent with." In an attempt to convince them of the truth, Allah then sent a severe drought that afflicted Iram. At its height, Hud pleaded with the people of Ad to repent, but they refused to listen. Eventually, they saw a cloud formation approaching Ad and believed that rain had finally arrived, thinking they were saved. However, the Quran responded, "No, what you were anticipating is a violent wind coming with painful punishment." Those clouds did not bring rain but a sandstorm, and the outcome was cataclysmic. As described in the Quran, as for Ad, they were destroyed by a furious, bitter wind, which Allah unleashed upon them continuously for 7 nights and 8 days, so that you would have seen the people therein fallen as if they were hollow trunks of palm trees. Therefore, ends the story of the Adites. Their fate, their city, according to the Quran, was obliterated by a sandstorm, buried beneath the sands of the desert, as if they had never existed. The question posed by many scholars is whether this story is true or merely a rhetorical tool. An allegory conceived as a veiled passive threat against diverting from God, or if there could really be the remains of a once mighty ancient kingdom buried beneath the Arabian sands. One thing is certain, though the Duram may not exist in other Abrahamic traditions, the Quran is not the only place where their story is told. During the 9th century CE, the first example of what would become one of the world's most popular and oldest books was being assembled in Syria. It would bring together the early folk myths of Persia in an extraordinary compilation that would come to be known as Alf Layla wa Layla, The 1001 Nights. The basic premise of the book was simple. The Persian king discovers that his wife has been unfaithful and has her executed. He then marries a succession of virgins but executes each one the morning after their wedding before they have a chance to be unfaithful. Eventually, the king marries a woman named Scheherazade who, on the night of their wedding, begins telling him an incredible story that she does not finish. The next morning, desperate to hear the conclusion of the story, the king decides not to execute Scheherazade. That night, she finishes the story and begins another. This repeats every night. Each of the stories she tells represents an ancient Persian myth. Finally, after 1001 nights, the king decides to spare her life, and they live happily ever after. After its initial creation in the 9th century, the compilation of the book grew and expanded over the years, depending on the religious and political climate of the time. By the end of the 9th and 10th centuries, stories from Iraq were added, and in the 13th century, stories from Egypt and Syria entered. As time went on, the book became a kind of living mosaic of myths and stories from the Middle East. The book eventually appeared in Europe in 1704, first in French and then, after its explosion of popularity, in English, German, Italian, Dutch, Danish, and Russian. By the end of the 18th century, it was printed all over the world and contributed to shaping our modern understanding of the region's history. There is a story in the 1001 Nights that deserves special attention, the story of a man named Abdullah bin Ali Kalaba. In this story, he finds himself in the desert searching for his lost camel and stumbles upon an incredible deserted city. He describes the castle with its vast doors encrusted with jewels and colorful flowers, the pavilions made of gold and silver embedded with gemstones, and the doors of the pavilions resembling those of the castle. For beauty, their floors were strewn with large pearls and balls no smaller than hazelnuts, musk, ambergris, and saffron. Now, when I reached the heart of the city and found no created being of the sons of Adam, I was about to faint and die of fear. Furthermore, I looked at the high roofs of the chambers of the pavilion and their balconies, and I saw rivers flowing beneath them. In the main streets, there were trees laden with fruits and lofty palm trees, and the manner in which they were built was a brick of gold and a brick of silver. So I said to myself, doubtless this is the promised paradise for the world to come. Upon returning from the lost city, Abdullah immediately seeks to inform the local government representatives of his incredible discovery, of what he has seen, even showing them some of the pearls, musk balls, ambergris, and saffron. The officials, amazed by the account but skeptical, send for another expert on the matter and ask him if he has ever heard of such a magnificent city. He immediately responds, "Yes, O Commander of the Faithful, that is Iram with its straight adorned pillars, of which there never has been the like in the lands, and the builder was Shaddad son of Ad the Great." The man then laughs with Abdullah and the officials, recounting the story of the mighty king Shaddad and his city, Iram of the Pillars. Shaddad ruled the earth alone. Now, he loved reading in ancient books and came across the description of the future world and paradise with its pavilions, pillars, trees, fruits, and so on. His soul drove him to build something similar in this world, in a magnificent and majestic manner. Under his command were 100,000 kings, each ruling over 100,000 chiefs, each commanding 1,000 warriors. So he called them all before him and said, "I find in the ancient books and annals a description of paradise, as it is intended for the other world, and I desire to build its equivalent in this world." For many years, they worked hard, constructing this heavenly city for their all-powerful sovereign, until finally, he went to the king and told him that his city was ready. Yet, before the mighty king could even reach the city, disaster struck. On his departure date with his host, rejoicing in the fulfillment of his desire, a loud noise from the heavens and the power of Allah was heard, destroying everything with its vehement clamor. Neither Shaddad nor any of his companions laid eyes on the city. Furthermore, Allah wiped out the road that led to the city and left it unchanged. Before Shaddad could enjoy the spoils of his paradise created on earth, he and his city were destroyed, lost forever in the Arabian sands. It seems, upon careful reading, that the story of Abdullah bin Ali Kalaba both confirms and expands upon the story of the Diram in the Quran. Could there really not only be a lost city buried beneath the sands of the Arabian desert, but also a lost city of unimaginable wealth, a lost paradise? For years, even centuries, many scholars claimed that the legendary lost city of Iram was not real, that it was merely a product of religious allegories and fantastical fiction. However, everything changed in the 1970s. In 1964, an archaeologist from the University of Rome named Paolo Mattia embarked on a mission to a site in northern Syria, in an area called Mardike, located about 56 kilometers southwest of Aleppo. In the early years, Mattia and his team found very little, except for a few scattered fragments. This encouraged them to continue the excavations. Eventually, in 1968, they made the long-awaited breakthrough. That year, they discovered a statue dedicated to the goddess Ishtar, bearing an ancient inscription stating Ibitlim, King of Elba. It was a stunning discovery, as Elba was the name of a city mentioned in the texts of ancient Egyptians, Sumerians, and Akkadians but had never been identified in modern times. Recognizing the significance of this find, Mattia and his team slowly continued to excavate the site for years. uncovering numerous temples, walls, and other impressive structures that once constituted the city of Elba. However, what happened next surpassed everything they had found before. In 1974, Mattia and his team cleared the debris of an ancient palace, and it was there that they discovered 42 clay tablets that seemed to be part of some kind of archives. In reality, this was just the beginning. Underground, they found several thousand clay tablets carefully arranged on collapsed shelves that had been destroyed in a fire that engulfed the palace. The fire turned out to be a blessing for archaeologists and historians as it preserved the clay tablets, as if they had been baked in an oven. The tablets even had clay catalog labels still attached, allowing for their identification. In total, archaeologists discovered around 17,000 tablets and fragments containing an unfathomable treasure trove of information about the city of Elba and the surrounding region at that time. What's even more incredible is that the tablets contain detailed information about the neighbors and trading partners of Elba, including Damascus, Katna, Byblos, Lebanon, and the Canaanites. They provided behind-the-scenes historical insights into these places, as well as the kingdoms and civilizations known in modern times, but never in such detail. For many specialists, this is one of the most significant discoveries of the 20th century. Among the information included in the historical records of Elba's neighbors and trading partners, there was a particular mention that caught the attention of archaeologists: the legendary city of Iram. The tablets referred to it as the legendary Iram, the city with sharp pillars, seemingly confirming that the Iram mentioned in the tales of 1001 Nights had indeed existed in the past. The tablets even described Iram as a place of black magic and idolatry, thus confirming the alleged wrongdoings of Iram mentioned in the books. After long denying its existence, archaeologists had finally found tangible evidence of Iram's existence. The question that now arises is, if there is evidence that Iram once existed, where is it today? What happened to this lost city? And could it truly be buried beneath the sand? Elba was once a lost city, now rediscovered. Could we do the same with Iram? In 1948, a team of geologists from Petroleum Development Ltd in Man was conducting a survey in the vast desolate expanse of the empty quarter in the Dolphin province. During their exploration, they stumbled upon something very curious. As they approached the ancient shale oasis, they noticed in the distance what they initially believed to be a large white cliff. However, as they got closer, they realized it was not a cliff but the wall of a ruined fort perched above a quarry-like cave, descending into the darkness of the earth. The area around this fort was completely deserted, leaving the geologists wondering if and when the area had been a populated center justifying a fort and what had happened to it. However, because they lacked modern archaeological equipment and were more concerned about getting water from the ancient shale well, during their arduous journey through the desert, they did not delve further into the questions about this fort. They merely made a note of it and moved on. An interesting fact is that in 1930 to 1931, Bertram Thomas, during his journey through the empty quarter, also stopped at the Cypress Oasis and noted the presence of a rudimentary fort at the site. However, the locals told him that the fort had been built by a local chief only a few hundred years earlier. Thus, like the geologists from Petroleum Development Ltd, Thomas simply took note of this information and moved on. The question of whether this fort was indeed a few hundred years old or much older remained unanswered, an unsolved mystery for over 40 years. Nicholas Clapp, a writer, filmmaker, and amateur archaeologist, gained prominence in the early 1990s through a self-proclaimed crazy idea that completely changed archaeology forever. As a child, Clapp fell in love with the idea of a lost city beneath the Arabian sands after reading Bertram Thomas's Arabia Felix. When he became an adult, Clapp decided he would pick up the hunt where Thomas had left off, return to the region, and find the city. But first, a crazy idea came to him in the early 1980s. Clapp called NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, famous for its satellite radar imaging. When the scientists answered the phone, Clapp asked them a simple but unprecedented question: if a city were buried in the desert, could you see it through this radar? Surprisingly, the NASA scientists not only took his idea seriously but agreed to scan the empty quarter with a special radar system, capable of seeing through the sand and detecting geological features underground. On their next radar flight aboard the Space Shuttle in 1984, using the obtained images, Clapp and the laboratory scientists noticed something astounding. Throughout the region and across the empty quarter, there was an extensive network of ancient trade routes. Roads on which hundreds of thousands of traveling camels had packed the Earth's surface, now hidden beneath the sand. Clapp was convinced that these ancient trade routes held the secret of a lost city beneath the sands. He speculated that at the point where these routes converged, there would have been ancient population centers, trade hubs along the trade routes. Indeed, upon closer inspection, Clapp noticed that a large number of these ancient routes seemed to converge at the same place, the shale oasis. Armed with this information, Clapp enlisted the services of an American archaeologist named Jerry Zarins and a British explorer named Rolf Yane. Together, they headed to the region to uncover what was going on. Almost immediately, as the team began digging, they knew they were onto something. Firstly, they discovered that the locals who had told Bertram Thomas that the shale fort was only a few hundred years old were correct. The fort was indeed a few centuries old, except it had been built on the ruins of something much older. As they dug deeper, they started uncovering the remnants of a large ancient settlement, remarkably dating back nearly 5,000 years. At the center of this ancient settlement lay something truly spectacular, a massive and imposing fortress surrounded by 8 walls, each measuring approximately 3 to 3.52 meters thick and 18 meters high. At each corner of the fortress stood a massive tower about 3 meters in diameter and 9 meters high. Based on their findings within this fortress, it was a royal residence, a processing and storage facility for the ancient city, as well as an archival center for an ancient trading hub. However, there was more. As they continued their work, the archaeologists discovered what had become of this once flourishing settlement. It appeared that the city had been built atop a limestone cave, before the weight of the city eventually caused it to collapse into a giant sinkhole, destroying the city and burying it forever beneath the sand. As much as this saddened the archaeologists, they were forced to admit that the parts of the city that had disappeared into this sinkhole were likely lost forever. This left them with questions and speculations about what other mystery could be revealed if they were able to recover what was salvageable from the area. But for Nicholas Clapp, no further discovery was necessary. He believed that the mystery had been solved, that he had obtained what he had come for. Here lay a once powerful economic center, marked by imposing towers far beyond what should have been technologically possible at the time. This center had been destroyed by a cataclysmic event and buried under the sand. For Clapp, this could only mean one thing: the lost city had finally been found. Ranulph Fiennes, the late, agreed to write a book in 1992 asserting that the long-standing mystery had been solved. The book was titled Atlantis of the Sands. Could it truly be the long-lost city of Iran that had been found? And if so, what other unspeakable treasure of this ancient powerful city could be buried deep beneath the earth? What other ancient mysteries could be solved or revealed? Would it be the gold and jewels of the earthly paradise, the Durram described in the Arabian Nights? Or perhaps something even more? Realizing that these structures would require further examination for which he was not qualified, Al-Said sent the photos he had extracted from Google Earth to David Kennedy, an archaeologist from the University of Western Australia. Kennedy, who had spent 40 years documenting stone structures and funerary monuments in the Arabian Peninsula, sought out and documented these stone gates over the next decade. Eventually, in 2017, he reported having discovered approximately 400 of these structures spanning several hundred to several thousand meters in length, some reaching a thickness of 9 meters. Despite his many years of experience, Kennedy was perplexed about the purpose of these enormous structures. In his own words, they do not resemble structures where people would have lived, nor do they appear to be animal traps or disposal sites for corpses. It remains a mystery what their purpose was. In 2021, the mystery deepened as researchers reported finding over 1,000 of these structures, which they now called mustatil, derived from the Arabic word for rectangle. They covered an area of approximately 259,000 square kilometers. Even more astonishingly, archaeologists dated these structures to over 7,000 years old, making them older than the Stone Age. The more they discovered, the more archaeologists were perplexed about their function. Why were some highly visible while others seemed almost hidden? Moreover, how did the ancient people communicate and construct these imposing structures over such great distances, even on the slopes of mountains and volcanoes? It is an archaeological mystery, of course, but it is just one among the many archaeological mysteries that have emerged in the region in recent years. Let's take, for example, the stone circles discovered in the heights of the Golan Heights in 2015, which were found to be of the same age as the Stone Age. There are, in fact, 5 circles made up of enormous stones, ranging in height from 2 to 2.52 meters. In Hebrew, they are known as the Wheel of Giants, and perhaps rightly so, as they have a diameter of over 150 meters, making them nearly twice the size of Stonehenge. David Kennedy points out that similar large circles have been found throughout the region, all with a similar appearance. It is unlikely that this is a coincidence. Who could have constructed these massive stone circles, and why? Or consider the ancient funeral avenues discovered in 2022, stretching thousands of kilometers across the Arabian Peninsula. Please like and subscribe.